Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking, the time to join us today. We're going to be talking about the latest trends in oil patterns, kind of what's changing. What's unique about bowling is the environment is always changing. These trends continue to change, and we adapt to, what the modern environment is telling us. So thank you again for joining. My name is Gus Falgien. I am Vice President of Sales for Kegel. What's unique and kind of cool is as of January, I will have been with Kegel for 18 years. But it doesn't seem that long, and every day is something new. And lucky I get to travel the world and learn and talk about bowling all day long. So very unique. So again, thank you for joining us today. When we talk about trends, it's one of those things, like I said, we learn from where? All right. So when we talk about trends, it's unique. We do lanes all over the world. We get to see bowling at all sorts of different levels. Our tech support fields hundreds and thousands of calls on different things and changes. So we get to see a perspective of bowling that's unique. So we're always trying to learn, what's changing. Hopefully we can have, solutions to problems that maybe you might not know is coming yet, but is certainly, coming down the road. So when we look at trends, one thing that's important to remember is, we're taking a vast view of these around the world. Everyone's bowling center and their environment and their bowlers are unique to them. You might experience one trend but not see the other trend. So we really just try to give you the best of what we see and how things are changing and continually adapting. One of the things that, we continue to see the trend is really the amount of volume on the lane. Years ago, we might have been in that 18 to 20 mil range. Now it's not uncommon to see our average recreational pattern in the 24 to 26 mil range. Some of our tournament patterns now, if you follow some of those and have seen some of those, we can be upwards of over 30 milliliters of conditioner on the lane. At the end of the day, what's important about volume to always remember, it's about where that conditioner is, not how much there is. And there's variables that go into whether you need that amount of volume or not, i.e. the amount of games that are being bowled on your lanes, the types of players and the equipment that's being thrown down your lanes. Topography is a big one. Age of your surface, how old the lanes are, how much lineage are on those lanes. All of these things will create what you might need when it comes to the amount of volume on your lane. What I always like to say is if you don't need 26 mils, don't use 26 mils. You need the amount of volume on the lane to get through the amount of league or lineage that you're doing, or whether you're just open play versus league play. One of the things that we're seeing a lot is, the old one size fits all. I used to say years ago, one pattern, you really can adapt that pattern and get all of your bowlers happy. But we're in a unique area where, all your leagues may require something different. One league might need 27 mils, one league might need 19 mils. So really adapting your patterns and your volumes to the players and the leagues you have is important. With the modern lane machines now, we can set the machines up, they'll change patterns, they'll do things without you having to remember to do it. And being unique to the bowlers really is specializing to your customers today. It's just not that pattern. So you can have the same basic pattern, same shape, same everything, but only use a volume of 18 mils in that league and 27 mils in that league. So again, at the end of the day, when it comes to volume, remember this, what type of conditioner you're using is important too. Whether you need more of that volume or less of that volume. So really adapting that to different clientele is very important today. But at the end of the day, like I said, only put as much volume on the lane that you need for that specific tournament or league that you have. We're also, we're going much longer with what we would say the applied oil is conditioner today. We're really bringing what we used to say the front or the head section, bringing that conditioner down through the mid lane. We're really trying to control that spark point, if you will, through the mid lane. With that, we're needing to get a little more volume and more applied through that area to protect that area and stabilize that area from change or quicker transitions. As surfaces are getting older and more scratched up, as well as conditioner technology that are higher friction today, we can put a little more out there, but also just topography. As lanes continue to get more depressed, we're starting to get a little bit wider with our load structure, if you will, especially to try to help some of our straighter players from having to get too deep, too early, or start too deep on some of the fresher patterns. So getting a little wider and protecting that lane going forward is important, moving forward with what type of load structure you do for that pattern. Kind of, with volume comes your pattern distance. Fine-tuning pattern distances for different players in different leagues or tournament play that you're looking for is important. We used to be in that 39 to 40, 41 foot range. That kind of gave us good angles for lots of different styles. With the amount of aggressiveness that we're seeing and stripping all the time and re-oils and strong back ends, we're going much longer with distances or overall buff of the pattern. It's not uncommon for pretty much most of all of my recreation patterns I do for a lot of people to go 44 feet. Get that conditioner down, buff longer. Really, the longer you're going, you're kind of creating a little more hold area down lane. Keep the ball on line a little bit better. And the hold area really is kind of, if the player misses in a little bit into the middle of the pattern, the ball doesn't overreact on the back ends. Kind of holds pocket a little bit, and it just creates a much better, smoother overall transition. The more arcier, the more smoother ball transition in a lot of cases, the more predictable that ball motion is, more understandable it is. As the pattern breaks down, it's more understandable. So going longer, in the old days, with some of maybe the older technology of conditioners as well, where we were worried, oh man, if I go that far, I'm going to have, 50 ball calls or 40 out of ranges tonight. Well, if you have the right front to back taper, which we're going to talk about as we move forward, but with a lot of the modern technology and conditioners, we're not really worried about those types of calls or getting that conditioner in the part of that back end of the lane that's going to create the mechanic problems. Of course, we don't want to create problems. At the same time, we want to create the best possible condition for all of our different leagues and players and that. I mean, there's so many different variables that go in there. But at the end of the day, if you can fine-tune your program and have a nice base pattern that seems to work well structure-wise and volume-wise, distance, now you can adapt that different nights of the week and really make your bowlers feel special that you're customizing that pattern for them. And that way you're not trying to get the one size fits all. Because anytime you make a change in your pattern, if you go longer or you add volume here or you do some, you're affecting some style. You're affecting someone in some way, shape, or form. By being able to fine tune these, you adapt to a group rather than a specific style or a specific player style, if you will. So really, at the end of the day, in these trends, fine-tuning is the best way to adapt and really take care of all of the types of players you have. Well, change is coming. Change is always happening. We adapt to tournaments all over the world. We're constantly looking and seeing, what is changing and how we change and what we do to make sure that the integrity of the event and all of that is taken care of. And those changes ahead, again, all of your environments are different and unique. What change you need to do you need to make sure adapts to your players and your environment at the end of the day. When we talk about front to back taper, the need for speed, if you will, our machines are the only lane machines on the market that can actually change the speed of the machine in the forward as well as the reverse. What that allows us to do with our speed is really fine tune our front to back taper. Today's game, again, is really about front to back taper. It's where I like to say the ball does or doesn't do the right thing. The ball doesn't hook too early. If it goes too long, if we get the right ball motion through the right part of our front to back taper, you can open up different angles and styles for players, as well as the biggest part is controlling transition. The more stable a lane pattern is front to back, and the more we can stabilize that from quick change or blowing out right away, the longer your bowlers can stay in a spot, but more importantly, the more predictable it is as it changes. Most players know they need to move their feet. They'll adapt with that as it changes. So with our machines, we call the speeds IPS. What that means is inches per second. So our 6 different drive speeds we normally use within a pattern start at what we call 10 IPS. They go 14, 18, 22, 26, and then in our highest speed at 30 IPS. This really allows us to change how that machine travels forward and back on our reverse pattern. What you're looking at here is an example of the change in those speeds. So if you're looking at the graph from left, that's basically your foul line in a 3-dimensional view, and the end of the pattern at 40 feet, and what that would look like in the buff of the machine. Now what you're looking at is the scale's a little bit hard to see, but the end of the pattern is almost the exact same units on the scale. What really changes is as we change speed, you're going to see how that brush hits equilibrium or changes that front to back. So if you're looking at the top one, that's a 2-to-2 at 10 IPS with 10 loads. So that volume is at there with 10 and speed at 10. We're taking that and it's going to buff out to 40 feet. Then as you go down, you'll see we have the exact same 10 2-to-2 loads at 14. And then at the last one, we've got 2-to-2, 10 at 18. What I want you to look at is at the top one, you can see where our transition or where that buffer brush starts to create that front to back taper at around 13, 14 feet at the high point. If you look at 14, we're starting to push that point down to about 20 feet. And then if you look at the end, we're about around 25 feet. It's the exact same volume, the exact same everything, only we're changing the way the speed is allowing that conditioner to get from your heads down through the mid lane and then ultimately at the back of the pattern. By creating that front to back transition, again, stability, predictability is important. Nothing has changed in volume. We're the exact same volume, but how that brush hits equilibrium. As a slower IPS, we're allowing that brush to release that conditioner quicker to the lane surface in a smaller portion of the lane. As we speed that machine up, we're now allowing that brush less contact to bring that more farther down the lane, which in our trends, we're trying to get more down the lane and we're trying to protect that mid lane. If we get too steep of a taper, maybe like the top one, the ball's going to want to pick up in the mid lane and maybe roll up too soon, and now you get that where the ball doesn't want to continue on the back end, or you get that false out of bounds or what we would call hang because the ball used up all its energy. Or you can go to the extreme on the bottom where maybe the ball doesn't get into a roll and pick up the mid lane, comes off the back end and is real violent, kind of just jerks up. Well, again, unpredictable. A lot of people can't really control that much back end or that type of ball motion. So you really can play with your speeds and really change the way the ball sees the pattern by doing that. And if you think of your pattern in a zone, or I always say kind of stair steps, we really look at it, I look at it in the 3 ways. You got your heads or your fronts, your mids, and then your back ends. And with a right front to back, that transition as the oil migrates fills in depletion, stabilizes it. It also, as we're talking about going farther with our patterns, we don't have too much conditioner at the end of the buff line to push and create a transition or carry down or out of bounds type of ball motion. It's going to transition within the pattern, create that nice archy, understandable ball motion, predictable ball motion. That's the key at the end of the day. And now you're controlling your back ends. So really, left to right's important. You want to protect that. You want to create that. But at the end of the day, really, if you've got the right front to back ball motion, you're going to be able to make a lot of your bowlers happy and predictable. And game 1 to game 3, that's what you want, stability. Not big game, transition, okay game, or bad game, great game. Really, I want my bowlers from game 1 to game 3 to have as much consistency at the end of the day, scoring pace equal across the board. To me, bowlers are happy that way. There's no surprises from any of the games. Again, create consistency for your bowlers. We talk about then and now. In 2008, we created the navigation pattern series. And at the time, we created the 3 category series. We had recreation, challenge, and then sport. Well, recreation was house and sport existed, but there was really that middle ground. We recognized that people were looking for patterns that weren't necessarily super hard, but they weren't a house pattern. So that challenge category really opened up a lot of different places for leagues and stuff to kind of have a choice. We created these as a starting pattern. So you can start to see what our base patterns were and then adapt them to your center, your lanes, your conditioners, and that type of stuff. It was also created with what we call the original transfer brush system. So how the conditioner got to the lane was a little bit different than some of the older systems. A little slower, a little less, so you had to kind of do some different things. In 2013, we came out with the flex lane machine. That had what we called the duo transfer system. That was kind of a hybrid. So it had a brush that we liked in the system that created nice smooth transition, nice front to back, but the roller, which created less maintenance and quicker to the lane surface without buildup and easier, quicker to the surface. So as of now, we have what we released as the Navigation 2.0 V2, if you want to call them that. But also we adapted these because 2008 till now, things have changed. We're talking about the trends of today and, what is happening in there. The other thing that really changed, that opened up some doors in this program sheet, if you look in the middle of the program sheet, the first one down is what we call reverse drop brush. Reverse drop brush was added into the machine. What that gave us was the ability to bring the buffer brush farther into the pattern, where if you look at the pattern originally, it was a 41 footer, and you can see the reverse drop brush was 41 feet. If you take a look at the new V2s, you see the same distance, but the reverse drop brush is at 36 feet. So instead of the buffer dropping right at the end of the pattern, we can bring that farther into the pattern. The farther into the pattern you bring that, the more it opens up that back zone. The more you bring that buffer brush to the end of the pattern, the tighter or the more volume kind of you're putting into that area. So you can really control that. You also, where you bring that brush in, you can control that little bit of a slope of the mid lane, which is, again, where we're trying to protect that part of the lane. So if you're looking at the patterns, the biggest difference you'll see following our trends is more volume going forward. So you can see the shape left to right. Speeds are very similar, but now we have more loads going forward, more volume going forward. And now you can see where we stopped at 15 feet on the old ones, we're over 30 feet now. Again, creating that area, protecting that mid lane's the key. The more we can protect that, the more stable it is. And now, because we are going farther forward, so you got more volume, drop brush is really important because now we can really control that back zone so we don't get too much down there or too much transition. So you can see in the trend there, we're going farther, and the volumes we brought Main Street, as this was one of the most popular navigation patterns in the recreational series, we brought the volumes up to match today's environment and that. But if you look at what we want to kind of look at the zones or our ratios, if you will, the ratios are a little bit higher in the new ones. For those of you that are familiar, when we did the original navigation patterns, we did our ratios from 0 to 3, 3 to 5, and then anything above 5 was considered our sport pattern category. USBC has since adjusted those ratios. We also needed to bring our patterns in because we didn't want to create confusion. We wanted our patterns to match what the standard and or what USBC guidelines were, so there's no confusion in leagues of what you're using. Those ratios are now 0 to 4, 4 to 8 challenge, and anything above 8 is considered a recreational. So when you're looking at this, what's important is, because a lot of people would define patterns based on the ratio. The higher the ratio, the easier it is. Lower the ratio, the harder it is. And that's partly because of the way we're calculating the ratios. So if you're looking at this composite graph, if you will, if we were to go to the end of our oil distance buff and push all of that conditioner to the foul line, what this composite is showing you is how that volume of conditioner stacks up on each board left to right. The lighter shade is our forward volume. The darker shade would be our reverse volume. Again, our lane machines are unique because we can oil forward as well as in the reverse. So if we're looking at this pattern at a 12 to 1, the way they calculate the ratios is we're taking average between 3 board to 7 board, left and right on the outsides, and then 18 to 18 board in the middle of the pattern. So if you're looking at this and it says a 12.5 to 1, basically it's telling you there's 12.5 times more conditioner in the center of the lane than on the outside. So there's a lot of shape in that pattern. And there's a lot of what we would call margin of error, lots of mistake, because there's a lot of conditioner in the middle for hold, and they're a lot less drier outside to create more swing. So it gives the bowler much more margin of error to maybe miss their target and still get to the pocket. So that's why as you get into challenge and sport, those ratios are gonna come down. As the ratio comes down, it kind of puts a little more emphasis on shot making, speed control, that type of stuff, because you don't have as much margin of error miss. Beaten path was one that sat in our challenge category. So again, following the trends, you can see we've got much more conditioner going forward. We're farther down the lane, and we've increased the volume a little bit to match today's trends. As you notice as we go, a lot of times you're what we call 2 to 2s. That's the amount of conditioner from 2 board to 2 board. As that number increases, you're going to see the ratios lower and they become more difficult, because the more conditioner you put outside, the flatter the pattern becomes. You're taking away that margin of error. Most of the time, your average recreational pattern will be within 2 to 1, maybe 3, depending on your surface and or conditioner. As you get into challenge, you're going to kind of be 3 to 4. Once you get into the 5, 6s and above, that's really going to define you as a tougher pattern, more of a sport type pattern, if you will, at the end of the day. Looking at our ratios here, you can kind of see these lines. What that's showing you now is the composite. Again, we're getting more conditioner down lane through that mid lane to make sure we've got the right amount of conditioner to hold up for the right amount of games. The ratio is adapted to fit within that challenge category, to fit it within that area. Our highway to hell, that was one of our more populars. You can see following trends a little farther down the lane, but we didn't go as far because we don't want as much shape going forward. Remember, when you're kind of defining your front to reverse, forward kind of gives us our shape, gives us our exit point or break point, if you will. Reverse is where we're creating depth, durability, and maybe some extra hold as you're bringing that volume closer to the foul line. So in this case, you can see 4 2-2s, a little bit flatter down lane, because again, we want to fall within that 2.5 to 1 under 4 ratio, so that we fall within that sports area, if you will. So all of these patterns, both versions are on our pattern library, pattern apps. You can go there, download them, check out the differences. These are great starting points to kind of see and adapt. Maybe you take one and kind of adapt that to your own scenario, your own center. But at the end of the day, again, different conditioners will react a little bit different. Topography always comes into play, but that's a seminar that we'll get into at a much later date. Let's talk about some of the modern conditioners. What does that mean to the environment? A lot of times people ask, why do you have so many conditioners in your line? Like, how could you, why? Well, when it comes to conditioners in our line, we really try to have a different or a unique ball motion we're looking at. We don't try to just release a conditioner just to have a new conditioner. We really, if it doesn't differentiate itself within the line, and it doesn't even have to be more durable or less transition-y, but it has to be unique, maybe friction-wise, maybe ball motion-wise, something within there that does that. So when we look at our line, we're really trying to differentiate to match up a conditioner maybe for a specific environment. As much as we like our line of conditioners, that can work everywhere, and they might work in every condition, but one might really excel. That's why we have different ones within our line to really try to match every type of environment we possibly can. But what's unique is the Element series. It's the first series of conditioners that are what we would consider blendable or used together to create a specific ball motion. When we came out with the Flex in 2013, at the first time ever, we had the ability with this machine to have 2 tanks and 2 pumps. So we could run a different combination of different conditioners to get a different ball motion or a durability in a different part of the lane. Something that you can't just grab 2 conditioners, pour them in a jug, and hope they don't separate or hope they don't, come apart. You really want those unique characteristics on the lane to do what you want it to do. Some conditioners really bond and like the surface. Others really bond well and like the bowling ball. So if you can adapt to one like the lane and one like the ball and kind of, I don't want to say fight each other, but kind of work off each other, you've got a scenario that works very well. So the Element series, we were really excited when the Flex came out to be able to open up some different doors and do some different things that other lane machines on the market couldn't do. One of our most popular, at the time we came out with that, we released at the time Fire and Ice. And Fire is one of our more popular Element conditioners being used. It's a good, what we would consider tournament play, league play. It's got a little bit higher friction, meaning the ball will pick up in the oil a little bit sooner than maybe some of the other ones, where you might think of slickness, where you want, a surface, maybe a high friction surface to have a slick conditioner. We're starting to see that trend change a little, where a higher friction conditioner on a higher friction surface works well. Again, it's about blending out the ball motion and taking away some of that over, under, or unpredictable ball motion because the ball doesn't pick up the conditioner in the right part of the lane. So Fire is what we would consider a little bit good base, if you will, for our Element series, but also very good. What's important to remember about the Element series too is each element has its own unique characteristic that's very good on its own. But as you'll see, when we start to put them all together, it creates ball motion and different friction on the lane that you can't get in a single type style conditioner. With Fire was Ice. Ice by far would be considered our slickest conditioner or less friction-y conditioner in the line. It's very popular. We've used it for a lot of tournaments. It's still one of our most popular ones for tournaments. It's very durable, but it is a little bit slick. So when I talk about recreational patterns, typically Ice wouldn't be one of my more recommended ones, simply because it might be a little too touchy when it comes with the slickness of that. But always remember, if your bowlers are used to a specific ball motion and slickness, and you go to a high friction conditioner, you're going to have some change there that your bowlers might not like. So always be careful when you're looking at what your steps might be just by changing that. Well, we had a lot of people that loved fire, and then, well, ice. And maybe using it in a single application, fire might have been too frictiony, maybe ice was too slick. Current really sat right in the middle between the two. Gave us a very good ball motion that didn't pick up too soon, but wasn't too slick. So it was really kind of a nice middle ground, if you will, within the original Element series. And then, really, what we would consider a unique, very different conditioner to the bowling industry was Terrain. And we released Terrain a little bit before Bowl Expo. Really, Bowl Expo was kind of its launch. But we had the Element that we had been using, prior to that to really kind of see the uniqueness. It's by far the highest viscosity conditioner we've ever had. Again, high friction isn't bad for your bowlers today, even if you have a high friction. Again, predictable ball motion is your key. Blending out the over-under wet-dry ball motion, especially for your average bowler, is very, very important. What makes Terrain unique is it's the first what we consider, not consider, but it is non-Newtonian chemical, where all other conditioners pre-Terrain were what we considered Newtonian. And the best way to describe that is Terrain, the viscosity and the way the ball shears through it actually adapts differently to different styles. Number one question we get asked, I kind of touched on it, but how do I get one pattern for all my bowlers? Because if I put too much outside, I lose my high rev players in the middle. Or if I put a puddle in the middle, my straighter players get in and they can't hook the ball. And it's too dry to play out. Well, by using a higher friction conditioner, we can now, and the way it adapts in the viscosity and how the bowler sees it, we can put more on the lane wider and create more angles. So a higher rev rate player might see it shear through there at a lower viscosity. So they get that freer push, but still has the frictiony to get around the corner and read the mid lane properly. Where your straighter players now and still have the ball pick up soon enough and have enough energy to get through the pocket. And at the end of the day, people ask, I need the pattern. I can't carry corner pins. Well, again, it's about having the right front to back and the right ball motion, and more importantly, the right amount of energy, not too much or not too little, in the ball to get through the pins. If the ball gets through the pins properly from multiple angles, you're going to make a lot of different styles and a lot of different bowlers very, very happy. But again, talk about non-Newtonian. I'm a little chubby, so I tend to eat French fries probably more often than I should, but ketchup. Well, if you've ever had a ketchup bottle and you start hitting it and it won't come out and you start really putting force to the bottle, it becomes a liquid and now it comes out of the bottle and on your plate. Once it sits there, it kind of solidifies again and kind of comes back to its state. That's really what Terrain sees. It's the first. So if I'm a higher rev rate player, my ball gets through there, shears nice, it gets to the spot. But if I'm maybe up the back of the ball a little bit, tends to be a little slower with the ball speed, less rev rate, I'm still going to allow the ball to pick up. So my higher rev rate players, the ball doesn't pick up early, but the ball does pick up for some of your straighter players. So it is a very unique conditioner that we think Prodigy was still our number one conditioner seller around the world. Why? Because it works in a lot of environments and it's a friendly, easy conditioner to use. Terrain really has become that Prodigy. We've had a lot of comments that, hey, man, this is like the new Prodigy. I personally think it's one of the best conditioners we've come out with that really is that A to Z. It works in all sorts of environments. Yes, you might have to adapt a little and do that, but you typically would do that with any conditioner change. But it allows you to do a lot of different things, and it's very unique again, most importantly, we can go longer, wider without creating issues for all you mechanics, because I know at the end of the day, we don't want to be chasing ball calls out of ranges all night. Here's just kind of a graph. If we put it out there for you to see, you can see again on the slick, high slick side, we're looking at the ice all the way to terrain, which is what we would consider highest friction, and then somewhere with fire and current. By changing how we blend all these together, we can completely create a different ball motion within the same pattern. So again, adapting to your bowlers. Well, what about the modern pattern design? What can we do uniquely different that's going to change? Why would I buy a flex, or maybe why do I need 2 tanks? It's just more things to worry about or more things I got to do. Well, again, you have a machine that's unique that I'm going to show you. If you have the ability to do some of these tools, you can adapt and create any environment for any of your bowlers out there. Modern pattern design, again, what has changed? What the ability? It's as much chemical as it is lane machine technology. But for those of you that have been around a couple days or two in bowling, in the 90s, you remember our term, the launch pad. The launch pad was really the front part of the lane. It was that first 20 feet or so. Build up the launch pad. We need to create that from the heads hooking, durability. It's done a little bit differently in the flex, and what I mean by launch pad. But what you're looking at on this graph, the green would represent terrain as our base conditioner, and blue would represent ice, which is the middle, which I'm looking at that, 0 to maybe 20, 22 feet front section of the blue. This is an illustration of our forward as well as reverse passes. So the lighters would be forward, and as you start to see the darker shades, that would be our reverse application. Why would I do this? Well, again, with the flex, we can change the different conditioners or the tanks within different loads going forward and reverse. In this instance, we're using terrain as our base 2-2s. I want friction outside. Again, I want to create friction. I want good durability and friction down lane through the mid lane. But I might want some slickness in the middle for my higher rev rate players. So I'm going to use some ice, because ice, slickness, durability, as most people will consider ice. And then I'll go back to terrain through the mid lane and buff that out. So now I've got a nice base of friction, but I've created slickness in the part of the lane that I want it, and then back to the friction again. So now I've got my straighter players that have friction that can kind of get into the base, fronts of ice, but still be able to go away from the pocket, as well as my high rev players getting all the free push. And also, by having some of that freer push with ice, you're going to minimize the amount of surface some of these players might see or want to use, because it's going to get the ball through there cleaner, so you're not worried about some of maybe those fronts blowing apart. And believe me, in most cases, it's not your heads that are blowing apart. What forces most of your players to the middle part of the lane is the mid lane. You lose the mid lane, you're going to force players to the middle. So again, by protecting that part of the lane and getting a little slickness up there, gets the ball through there a little cleaner. Again, the more angles we create for styles, the longer they can stand in that side, and they can play there longer with less of an issue of having to change and adapt. With that and the technology, we really wanted to highlight, and again, as we did with the navigation patterns as starting points and base patterns for you, we wanted to do that with the Element series as well as the Flex lane machine. So we wanted to be able to have some predetermined patterns that you can mix and match with different things. So here's an example of our sport category, which is radium, plutonium, arsenic, and krypton. Now, what's important too to always remember that we had inside our challenge categories, especially if you're looking for a specific ratio or distance, is the Kegel code. We want a very quick, easy reference for you to go and be able to find the pattern distance or ratio you're looking for. So you can see as a radium, that Kegel code is 1837. What that means is it's a 1.8 ratio, 37-foot pattern. So if you're looking for a specific thing, you don't got to go through thousands of patterns. You can look at our ratios, know right away, it's a sport pattern ratio. Here's my distance. You can find that very easy, quick, go through there. We got plutonium at our 2239, arsenic 1.3, very difficult, low ratio, flat pattern, 41 feet, and then ultimately krypton at 2.943. But you can see each one has a unique combination. Now, each one that you'll notice as we go along, terrain is our base. Again, why? Because it gives us the friction in the part of the patterns we want as our base, and then using the next tank, whether that's ice, fire, or current, to create a different feel in the middle part of the lane. If we want, a slicker feel, we'll go with ice. And if we want to bring it back down to the more of the terrain frictiony, we'll dial down from current to ultimately fire. So you've got your sport category here. We've got our challenge category. Again, remember, challenge category, those ratios have gone up. So we adapted these ratios. So as you can see, we got our tungsten, 6.2, 39 feet. Mercury, 4940. Chromium, 6742. And then titanium at 4244. With our base set element ones. But say you're running mercury. Man, I really like it, but man, a little more slickness in the middle of the lane. I'll just replace fire with current, and boom. I don't have to do any other crazy stuff to my pattern or go through a lot of different things to get that pattern to play the way we intended it to or the way you want it to. Recreation, we got our helium, carbon, neon, and lithium. What I want you to notice in these three, I talked about the ratio now being 8 and above. Again, without creating confusion, you can actually see we've added an extra digit to the code. So if you're looking at a carbon, now you can see it's a 10-3-4-2. What that means is now that's a 10.3 ratio pattern at 42 feet. So again, you know right away by the code, that's a recreational pattern. So if we're looking at our plutonium here, again, we know our tanks, so we got our combination here. We're looking at our distance, volume of 26.66, forward, reverse, and our reverse drop brush at 35. Again, reverse drop brush is very important. If you have a machine that maybe doesn't have that function, certainly it is something you can upgrade your thoughtware to put that in the machine. I highly recommend, even if you use it just for a couple feet, you'll be amazed at how different the back of that transition in your existing pattern the same way will change. What I get asked a lot in the forward and reverse is, what ratio is that? What ratio should I be in? Well, if you look at the transfer brush patterns, we really were in that 50-50 range, or even really 30 with 70 coming back because of the way that system worked. Now, the modern trend with the new system, we're applying, as I said, way much forward and reverse. So in a lot of cases, that ratio front to back with that volume should be within that 70-30, or even in a lot of cases upwards of 80-20. So if you're looking to figure out what your right front to back volume is or matching that up, take a look at that in your pattern, and you can adapt that as well, moving some of those loads to the forward. The biggest thing to notice when you're looking at patterns, whether you're a bowler or whatever, is the program sheet. Understanding this program sheet will help you understand, as a bowler, what type of equipment I want based on volume, distance. I can adapt my equipment or surface to that. Well, within the new program sheets, you're going to find some new information that's very important to you. One of the biggest things is this is a sport pattern, but you can see we've got a little new category here called mics. That's microliters. What that means is our machines have a pump setting. And in all the machines pre-flex, well, sport machines, program 30, you can do this if you didn't know that, had what we called an adjustable mic stream. So we can lower or raise the mic stream within that particular category or load area. So you can see as we go through, we've got our 2-2s at 50. As that pattern changes, we lower the mic stream. That also helps us control our front to back. Why this function is so cool is because a lot of times you're adjusting what we call the corners, your 2 to 2s. And maybe 5 is too much, 4 is not enough. So you're like, well, do I add 1 and slow the machine down? Do I go with 1 and maybe speed it up? And now my distances have changed and I'm not maybe getting that volume in the right part of the lane I wanted. Well, now you can say, I'm just going to raise the pump setting and get the exact volume in the exact part of the lane I want without touching any part of the program. You can really fine tune. This is important because if you know you need a little more at 30 feet and your last load is at 30 feet, I can just ramp that volume up right in that part, and now I've got the extra volume in the mid lane exactly where I want it. I'm not relying on my buffer brush or anything to get that conditioner to the right part. So that's a big one, understanding what that setting is and how much volume is being applied within that area. Of course, we've got our speeds. So we're running slower up front, which means we're really applying that to the front part of the pattern. And as we speed up, we're creating that taper down lane. We also have the ability, in some flexes, we had what we called the variable buffer upgrade. This allowed us to change the buffer speed 4 different speeds, forward or reverse. Again, it's kind of like the speeds of the machine. The faster we run that buffer brush, the quicker that brush is going to apply that conditioner to the lane. We can really create a steeper front to back by how we allow that brush to change. Now, why that changes is because in those 4 speeds, all of your AC machines or original quarter machines ran at a 700 RPM. As we went to the batteries, it went to 500, and then if you go way back, we had the standards, which we could slow the buffer speeds down. So in this instance, you see 4.3. 4 would be high RPM. We're running at 720 RPMs, 700. That means that brush is going to spin that conditioner off quicker. Once we go into 3, we're at a 500, which is kind of our standard. If you see a 2, that'd be a 200, and then a 1 would be a 100 RPM. Normally, you would see that speed down lane. So in our longer patterns, we're slowing the buffer and just kind of grazing that area. So we can go longer again without creating too much at the end of the pattern or extra transition. Then the important one too here is what tank I'm running. I'm running B forward and A on the reverse. So we got 2 tanks. Going forward, we're running fire, and then tank A, we're running terrain. So in this instance, we've got 2 compatible elements, but we're creating some friction on the way down and some friction up front on the reverse. So understanding those as a bowler or as a lane man, when you're choosing the conditioners, this is important because you might use different surface or different equipment. If you know the conditioner being used, you can adapt your arsenal to match the right conditioner to match up. And we all know today's game, a lot of it, you got the wrong ball in your hand or that surface doesn't match up, you might be at a disadvantage of your competition. Chromium 6742, 42 feet. Again, using our terrain with current, just adapting this to the lane machine. Again, using our adjustable mic streams as well as our buffer speeds. You can see here we got a 2. So if you're looking at this now, and I'm either a player or I'm trying to create less transition, I'm going, well, you know, I'm buffing at 2 from 35 to 42 feet. So I might see 42 feet and go, ooh, that's a longer pattern. I might need this. Well, by using that buffer at a slower speed, guess what? That back zone, all of a sudden, it might play like a 38 or 39 foot pattern because I'm just kind of simulating maybe a little bit of transition or push already in the pattern. So you might think it's a longer pattern and use a different equipment when maybe you don't need that. So you can kind of play around with those buff screens, if you will, with the variable buff, create it. Now you could, if you don't have the variable buffer upgrade in your flex or that, you know, you can run these patterns in your flex. You're just going to get a different ball reaction, if you will. It's going to be a little tighter down lane. Sometimes you might want it a little tighter down lane. You never know. Carbon, our 10.3 42 foot pattern, 24 mils. Again, look at our ratio front to back. Our drop brush at 34, very stable back of the pattern. Very stable break point, exit point, whatever you want to refer to it. Less transition in that area. We're using our terrain. So we've got friction out here for our straighter players. Let them kind of stay right longer, get the ball to pick up, continue through the pins, using our ice in the middle of the pattern. Again, if you're stable, your straighter players, as they move in, they'll still feel some of that ice and it won't be blown apart because you've got that slicker feel. So your boomers or your high rev rate players are still going to play fourth arrow. They're still going to go around the pattern. But now you actually have a place for some of your straighter players to maybe move in and still feel some of the slicker, but they got all of the terrain to the right, to the mid lane, to get that ball to do the right thing in the right part of the lane. If we're looking at our numbers, again, we've got our adjustable mic stream. Now, on your surface, and again, the rules have changed a little bit. As many of you know, the 3-unit rule is no longer in play. So you can play around with maybe how you have the outside oil. I will tell you, today's game, bowling balls, you need a conditioner on the outside part of the lane. You got to have something for the ball to roll up on and not overreact or stand up immediately in the dryer. But maybe 3 is too many. Like I said, 2, maybe not so much. In this case, we ran our mic streams at 55. So we lowered that pump to really adjust kind of that combination of the mics and everything out there to get the exact volume we want. That's important to be able to use that to get that matchup, if you will, on the outside part of the lane. Easy to adjust without changing everything else in your pattern. Standard buffer speeds. In this one, we're using terrain forward again. Create that base, create that friction, create the multiple look or the adaptable viscosity for your different styles outside and down lane. Ice in the middle to create maybe a little more slickness and durability. So in this pattern, it's very straightforward, 10, 3, 42. What also is really cool about the elements, and in this scenario, something that's really cool where we ran into a case where we were actually using, at the time, fire and terrain, and we were blending, we were doing some things in different loads, and we ran into the exact case where we had the right volume on the corners we really liked, but fire or terrain hooked too much. Well, ice was way too slick with those numbers. So instead of, altering the loads or different speeds or, rethinking our whole thought process, we actually can run both pumps at the same time. So we ran both pumps at a 25 mic stream, gave us 50, and actually blended terrain and ice together. Those two frictions together blended gave us the exact ball motion we wanted on the outside. Wasn't too slick, wasn't too hooky. So again, being able to adapt these to match your environment, you have endless possibilities to create the exact environment for every league or every style player you have. That's, pretty cool tools that you can use. What's always important at the end of the day, you can have the perfect program sheet. You can have the perfect lane conditioner. At the end of the day, if your lane machine is not functioning properly, your buffer brush is not in good shape, that program sheet at the end of the day is just numbers. The pattern is what's on the lane. The lane machine puts the pattern on the lane. If your lane machine speeds are out of adjustment, again, you're not getting the conditioner to the part of the lane that you think you're getting it to. So maintenance of your lane machine at the end of the day is important as having the right pattern with the right conditioner for the right thing that you're trying to do for your environment. Every environment's different. All we do at the end of the day is try to give you as many possible tools as you need to make your bowlers happy. And at the end of the day, if we've given you the tools and you can use those to make your bowlers happy, then we've done our job as a company and hopefully make the experience of everyone involved better and want them to come back and participate in our great sport. So I thank you. Hopefully you got some good information and understanding as the trends are moving. This is just really the first webinar of many we plan on doing on lane conditioning moving forward. So this is just really kind of the first in a series that we'll be doing. So hopefully you got some good information to take back and maybe do some experimenting. I know we're in the middle of winter season, but in the holidays sometimes you got some time to play around. So as always, we have tech support that's available. If you have any questions, anything like that you need help on, please call us here at Kegel and we will get the answers to you and we'll get your problem solved.